Hello and welcome back to the alternate podcast. I'm Tab, your host for today, day 4 of the Nicholas Kassotis wife dismemberment case, which is actually crazy bananas. I can't even tell you. If you have not listened to the first few days, please go back and listen from day 1. You're not going to want to miss what prior these prior podcasts, because day 4 gets wackadoo and you have to kind of know what happened day 1, 2, and 3. So let's begin now. Also, I'm on location. Actually, not on location. I'm totally out of location across the continent from where this is taking place in Georgia. The morning of day 4 began with technical but crucial testimony. The state called Dr. Edward Mondor, a forensic entomologist. That's the insect expert. Remember when I talked to you a couple days ago about the maggots? Yeah, they called that guy up. And why do I always get to talk about the maggots? Seriously, it's so gross. All right, he was accepted by the court as an expert in this field. I can't imagine there's a lot of them. Dr. Mondor explained to the jury how bugs can tell time in a murder case. When a body is left outside, certain insects like blowflies will quickly colonize it. And by analyzing their life cycle, egg, maggots, so on, a forensic estimate on how long the body has been exposed, he can tell. So in this case, Mindi's dismembered remains were discovered in the woods on December 2nd by a hunter. That was about a week after investigators suspect that she was killed. So the insect evidence was key to pinning down time of death. Dr. Mondor testified that he was first contacted by law enforcement on December 5th, 2022, and shortly after, that was just a couple days after the remains were found, he was provided with crime scene photographs and samples of these insects. They were collected from Mindi's body, remember, and then boiled and preserved. On the stand, he walked the jury through how those samples were preserved. For example, you drop the maggots in the boiling water to kill off the bacteria, and then you store them in alcohol to be examined later. Now, I'm sure that's all we really need to know on how to preserve insects from a dead body. But this is what this guy does. And so he says that Mandy died, and I keep saying Mandy, sorry, Mindi died between November 27th and November 29th. And that's what he estimates given these maggots. This scientific range is notable. It places her death before December 1st. And remember, he told the parents, or Mindi's parents, that she died on December 1st from a sudden stroke in a hospital. On cross-examination, the defense really kind of honed in on this timing. Dr. Mondor did acknowledge that the environment does play a factor. Things like temperature or whether the body was moved, it really could affect when the insects could colonize these remains. For instance, also that cooler weather might slow insect activity, or if the body was initially kept indoors, then dumped outside, that could delay when the bugs got to it. He agreed these variables mean that the timeline is just an estimate, it's not an exact timestamp. So, despite that, I think his professional opinion was pretty credible that late November 2022 was the minimum time frame of death, and that's what he's sticking to it, even though the defense kind of pushed him hard on. The state's next witness was Morgan Paddock, who was introduced as a lifelong friend of Mindi Kassotis. Morgan and Mindi had known each other from high school, so they've been, thick as thieves for a long, long time. Morgan testified that in 2022, she was staying in touch with Mindi, but it had become complicated because Mindi now was married to Nick, or Nicholas, however he goes. And according to Mindi, the couple was extremely wary of some unnamed threat. In fact, Mindi insisted that her and Morgan start using a messaging system called Signal for all their communication. Morgan explained that this was totally not normal. She has never done this. And it only started because Mindi and Nicholas said that there were dangerous people after them. Phone calls and regular text messages felt unsafe to Mindi, so they resorted to these secure chats. Mindi even warned Morgan that she wouldn't reach out unless she felt safe to do so. And if Morgan didn't hear from her, it's because the couple went dark, and that was for their own protection. This was, seriously, highly unusual in this friendship, and it left Morgan feeling really anxious and that something really dark was happening in Mindi's life. For months, Morgan did what Mindi wanted. However, she did take screenshots of these signal text messages, which, amen, Morgan, because, your spidey sense was up and it was telling you something was off. So Morgan testified that she did not learn what happened to Mindi until 6 months after Mindi passed. Not until May of 2023. And how she found out? Well, Nicholas Kassotis himself informed her. Morgan described receiving this shocking news from Nick that Mindi had died, and he portrayed it as a sudden medical death, consistent kind of what he's telling everybody else. But 6 months after, as soon as she did find out, red flags raised immediately, and she called GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and said, something doesn't seem right. Here are our signal chats that I have screenshotted because something feels off. She also shared a really personal detail. Even after everything, she finds herself driving by Mindi's last known residence from time to time just to think about their friendship and how this tragedy unfolded, which is super sad, but really kind of real life. Then we heard from Samantha Kolesnik. That's Nicholas Kassotis' ex-wife. Oh yes, he was married after Mindi. Samantha took the stand and introduced herself to the jury as Nicholas's third wife, though she emphasized that she had no idea at the time that he'd been married before or even married at the time. Samantha was very nervous, a little awkward on the stand, but rightfully so. She was now facing a real-life horror scene, and she recounted how she first met the man she knew as Nicholas Stark. In late September 2022, Samantha, an author of horror fiction, yeah, that's right, girlfriend writes horror novels. So she makes this public post on Twitter about her books, and out of the blue, a man named Nick Stark, aka Nick Kassotis, replied saying he had just purchased all 4 of her books. She was flattered and intrigued. She says, I'm not a celebrity. Like, I'm just kind of, yes, I write books, but I'm kind of a nobody. And so she was flattered that Nick was so enamored with her. And he says he also writes horror novels. I don't think he does. I think he's just writing his own. And so Samantha engages with him. And what started as a casual Twitter interaction quickly turned into a more private message, long phone call relationship. By November of 2022, only weeks after, Nick first contacted her, Samantha realized that she formed an emotional connection with this guy, and he was charming. When they finally did meet in person, December 16th of 2022, Nicholas came across as a lonely widower looking for a fresh start. And on the stand, Samantha described the heartbreaking backstory Nick told her.
Did you have occasion to meet an individual that went by the name of Nick Stark?
Yes.
Did you ever know the name Nicholas James Kassotis?
No.
Now, you indicated that at the time you were in the process of a divorce. You'd already been separated. Did you know Mr. Stark's marital status?
I believed I had. He told me that he was a widower, and that he had lost his wife and his unborn child about 2 years prior, and that they had both died in a hospital.
Can you tell us, how did it make you feel learning that he had not only the first wife who had passed, but the second wife from before her.
I don't think words will ever capture how I felt, but I felt if I had to choose some words, I'd say horrified, shocked, traumatized, violated, deceived. After learning that I tried to be as helpful as I could be because I was horrified.
So he claims that he lost his wife, their unborn child, in 2020, 2 years prior, supposedly due to complications from high blood pressure and an undiagnosed heart condition. In his words, he was a man who endured unspeakable tragedy and was just beginning to open up. In fact, Samantha also recalled that Nick said his wife had died in the hospital, a detail that stuck with her. Samantha had no idea that he was a liar, pants on fire, or that she was actually being courted by a married man at first. He hadn't lost Mindi at all. He also told her he was working remotely at a big corporation and they had him traveling all over Georgia, Missouri, Delaware. He even said his company was providing him housing in Delaware for this specific project. These claims explained why he was kind of in this transient lifestyle. Samantha also testified that in November 2022, as their relationship deepened, Nicholas really went out of his way to help her in real life. When her car got a flat tire, he surprised her by buying $600 of new tires for her and headlights. Samantha was really taken back by this generous offer. It was extravagant by someone that she had only just started seeing. And when I'm saying seeing, she had never actually met him in person yet or physically seen him. So she shows up with her flat tire and to the place where they towed her car and they were like, "Oh yeah, Nicholas Stark bought you all new tires." So she was like, "Wow, that's amazing," and a little weird. She also said she was a little concerned about this gift, and Nick apologized and said, "I'm just out of practice because I've been grieving so long and I've been alone for so long." So, really, he's just implying that he hadn't taken care of anybody in 2 years, reinforcing that he is a widower. Samantha admitted feeling a lot of empathy and allowing their relationship to progress. And progress it did. By early 2023, their whirlwind romance hit a major milestone. These two got engaged and in February, by the way. And Samantha said yes, and they married in April. So talk about whirlwind. So they had met each other maybe 6 months before they got married, just 4 months after Mindi really was murdered. But of course, Samantha had no idea. On the marriage certificate, Nicholas listed his name as Nick Stark and indicated that this was his second marriage, claiming his previous marriage ended on December 1st, 2020. In reality, it was his third marriage, and his first wife actually also passed away. What? Samantha didn't see these red flags at the time. She trusted Nick Stark as a caring widower, and she was excited to build a life with him. Samantha went on in detail. About another lie. So they were supposed to purchase this house at the end of March of 2023. She and Nick had planned to buy the house together, and Nick was putting down the down payment. They found a home that they loved. They made an offer, and it was accepted. Closing day was set for March 20th, 2023. That morning, Nick left their home saying he was going to pick up the cashier's check for the $850,000 to bring it to closing. Hours passed and he didn't return. Then Samantha started receiving alarming text messages from him saying that was in an accident and he was in trouble. And she was pretty frantic. When she finally saw him, she noticed that he looked burned. She says he looked a little burned. He had half an eyebrow. It was totally fried off. And she testified that she was really, really nervous. So Nick says, you know, there was this car crash and the car went up in flames. Samantha, said you got to go to the hospital where she took him for his injuries. And the house was, the closing was missed and that $850,000 check up in flames. So, with that, their dream of owning this new house evaporated. And looking back, Samantha realized that this accident, in air quotes that I'm saying, was a convenient way to not show proof of any funds. And at the time, she felt really hurt, but also relieved that he was, alive and recovering. The moment of reckoning for Samantha came not long after that in late spring of 2023 when the GBI, the special agent who was on the stand, Tracy Sands, contacted her out of the blue. Wait, let me say out of the blue. When special agent Tracy Sands contacted her out of the blue. What Agent Sands revealed left Samantha in shock. The man she knew as Nicholas Stark was actually Nicholas Kassotis, a fugitive suspect in his wife Mindy's murder. He wasn't a widower at all. His wife hadn't died 2 years ago in the hospital, but rather had been killed in late 2020 and dismembered. Samantha did not hesitate once she knew the truth. She told the jury that she immediately began cooperating with GBI and turning over all of her communication with Nicholas, which, by the way, wasn't on these secretive communication apps that he was using with Mindy. So I'm not sure what happened to Jim McIntyre. She also wanted to help in any way possible now that she understood what he was accused of. She wasted no time in extricating herself from this man or this marriage. She filed for an annulment on the grounds of fraud, and it was granted in legally erasing herself from Nicholas Kassotis' life until now. She has to be on the stand, and now you can see why she's so nervous, and her demeanor was that, in the beginning. Wrapping up day 4, prosecutors presented a key piece of evidence, an audio recording of Nicholas Kassotis' police interview after his arrest. So they introduced GBI Special Agent Tracy Sands to the stand. He is the same agent who contacted Samantha. Agent Sands was involved in the investigation and had interviewed Nicholas Stark, who at the time was Nicholas Kassotis, but at the time he was using his, second name, Nicholas Stark. Now, this is a 2-hour interview that they played for the jury. So this took up most of the day. And I was going to play you some of this, but it is very long and tedious and super slow. He says, about, 2 million times in the 2 hours. And listening through it, it was painful for me. So I think I'm just going to wrap it up for you and tell you what he said without all the pauses. And I think you'll get it. Like, he did this interview, and here is what he claims. Oh, first, before I tell you, he is going by Nicholas Stark to these investigators, although they know his name is Nicholas Kassotis, but he says he changed his name to Nick Killian Stark. Now, middle name, Killian, which is a weird choice for a middle name, if you ask me. So in May of 2023, so Nick, going by his alias at this time, was very calm. He described a campaign of harassment that he and Mindy had endured for the last couple years. He claims it had terrorized him and Mindy. He traced the trouble back to 2018, saying when a strange thing started happening. Money started vanishing from their bank accounts, their belongings were vandalized, and he was getting anonymous threats. By 2019, he said the situation escalated to a dangerous level. He and Mindy moved from Alexandria, Virginia to Charlottesville, and they just wanted to start fresh. But Nick claimed that shortly after the move, he was violently assaulted by a man with a baseball bat. Then he says, well, actually, I think it was my own father, Wayne Kassotis. Now, this is a allegation of family betrayal. Nick was insinuating that his family was also manipulated by this man, Jim McIntyre. He says that it left him badly hurt and deeply paranoid. He responded by installing elaborate security systems in his home, fearing another ambush. And from this point on, Nick and Mindi felt that they were under constant threat. Nicholas interviewed Nicholas's interview continued to walk through their nomadic life. He explained that in the aftermath of the 2019 bat incident, the couple bounced around to different places for safety. They even stayed with Mindy's family for a time. Actually, over a year, they lived with Mindy's brother, Frank, and sister-in-law, Megan, while Nick worked at for a software project. However, by 2021, tension grew in that house with Frank and Megan supporting them. And Frank and Megan were like, you got to move. Also, in Frank and Megan's house, he said that Mindy's mom lived there. And then at some point, Mindy's dad lived there. And now they're all just one big happy family living in, Frank and Megan's house. And then Frank and Megan said, you got to move. He also says that then Mindy's parents put them up in a hotel and then they were all going to move together. Then he goes on to claim a personal heartbreak that they were dealing with. He said that him and Mindy had been trying to conceive a baby, but it was difficult. And in July 2021, Mindy suffered a miscarriage and it devastated both of them. Mindy also had persistent health issues, including high blood pressure, that complicated any pregnancy attempts. According to Nick, the stress of their situation and this harassment that they're having from this outside Jim character, compounded with Mindy's health struggles, it just was all adding up. Also, to note, Mindy's parents believe that she was 8 months pregnant in late of 2022, though the autopsy on day 2, you would noticed that they found no signs of pregnancy at the time of her death. Nick claimed that Jim McIntyre, was the mastermind behind all their woes. In this recorded interview, Nick says Jim was a shadowy man who inserted himself into their lives and exerted all this control over everything. Jim allegedly told Nick that he was with the FBI and that Nick and Mindy were in grave danger from unspecified enemies. And according to Nick, Jim's influence was pervasive and sinister, and Jim communicated with them constantly via this Signal app, reinforcing why Mindy also used this Signal app. Jim would give Nick instructions on what to do, whom to trust, which basically was no one, and even spread lies to manipulate Nicholas's understanding of his own family. For example, Nick described how Jim meddled in his family relationships at one point. Jim allegedly told Nick that his parents weren't actually his parents, and he believed it. He says, we felt like we were constantly being watched. They questioned him if he's ever met this Jim character. He says he had. He said he worked for him. This is where he was doing this software like this software project that he was doing that was undercover. But he also says this is also why he installed cameras. Jim had them so paranoid. Nick claimed that they even talked about moving away, changing their identities to escape from this ever-present threat. In the 2 hours, he also talks about Mindy's hospital stays that no one ever has heard about before, but he says no one's heard about it because Jim told them not to tell anybody, even Mindy's family. Nick also gave his version of days surrounding Mindy's death, and telling Jim's instructions became very specific. Nicholas said that Mindy's release from the parental center or hospital in late November 2022, Jim ordered him to prepare for immediate departure. basically to go on the run again. Nick described how he packed their essentials into plastic totes, even loading them up in Tupperware containers. Then, following Jim's cryptic directions, Nick also gave his versions of the days surrounding Mindy's death. He says Jim gave him instructions, very specific instructions on the release of Mindy's from the parental center, this brick building. And he says, Jim says, okay, you guys are going on the run again. Pack up your stuff, put it in Tupperware containers, and then go drop them off in these different drop off locations. So Nicholas does what Jim says, goes to all these drop off locations before he knows that Mindy had actually died in the hospital. These are all based on what Jim, and I'm air quoting Jim, told him to do. Nick does admit to the investigators that this whole scenario was super strange. He couldn't even give the investigators the exact address for these handoffs. It was just really vague details about where and why and what had happened. Nevertheless, he was saying he trusted Jim's plan. Then came December 1st, 2022, the day Nicholas claims that he discovered that his wife had died. On the recording, Nick's tone grew really somber as he described that day. He said after he had done the drop off of all these, totes, Mindy's condition seemed to improve and he was told she was ready to leave. According to Nick, he received a call on Thursday, December 1st, confirming the time to pick up Mindy. But when he arrived at this appointed place where he doesn't really know where it is, Nicholas described it as just a brick building. He was met by a doctor or someone posing as one who delivered the crushing news to him. Mindy had passed away suddenly. On the audio, Nicholas recounts his confusion. He described himself as reeling, struggling to comprehend how Mindy could have just died so fast. He even said he signed paperwork to release her remains and was informed an autopsy would be conducted. Then he says he, was to go pick up her remains, which they cremated. He gave them $5,000 cash to get her remains, and then he decided to spread it over the bay where he would really, where she would really want to be, which, by the way, you don't involve the parents in any of this. This is totally crazy. He then said he did help Mindy's elderly parents. He put them up in a new apartment in Hilton Head, South Carolina, and packed up the home him and Mindy used to share in Savannah. Now he goes on to talk about his life after Mindy. He said he underwent some medical treatments and some surgeries of his own in the months after Mindy passed, which affected his ability to communicate with friends and family. Nick acknowledged that emails were sent out in early of 2023 to Mindy's family, telling them that Nick himself had a terrible accident and passed away. That's right. He had sent emails, or someone in I think it was him, sent emails to Mindy's family saying that he had died himself, and they believed it. In the interview, Nick suggested that it was a directive from Jim. And remember, Mindy's mom testified that she believed that Nick was dead until, the GBI showed up at her door in May of 2023. So at the end of the day, he painted himself as a man that was utterly controlled by this alleged FBI imposter, James McIntyre, to the point of orchestrating all of this, his fake demise, Mindy's death, all by Jim. Throughout the interview, Nick spoke in a real matter-of-fact tone. He described Jim McIntyre as the ever-present puppeteer in his life. He made promises, he made threats, he pulled the strings behind the events. Nick admitted that the entire saga left him feeling paranoid and isolated. And by the end of these of this 2-hour long recording, the jurors had essentially heard Nicholas Kassotis's full defense narrative, which I think was prosecution's point. Like, hey, you guys want to hear what actually happened? Let's hear it from the man himself. And that wrapped up day 4 of the Nicholas Kassotis trial. So I am very eager to see what is next. I want to hear if they ever found out who this Jim McIntyre character is. Who are they going to bring up next? Margot is on with you for day 5. And until then, think like a juror and decide like one too.